Warhammer 40,000 Gladius Relics of War is a 4X strategy game. With over 7 races to choose from, it can be kind of confusing or at least hard to decide which faction you're going to select for your first or returning playthrough of the game. The focus of this video here today is pretty much just to go through every single faction that is currently announced with the game. This is including the newly released Tau faction. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a 2 or 3 minute rundown of each faction, essentially how they work from a very high level, and show off all the units of them quickly. This can hopefully kind of aim or at least put you in the right direction when you are selecting your next faction for our next playthrough of Gladius Relics of War. At the end of this video, we'll be also doing a giveaway for the base game as of the publishing of this video. So if you want to be entered into the raffle to get the base game, I've got 5 keys to give away, compliments of Slytherin. They emailed me and said, hey, here's some keys, give them away on your VODs or on your streams. So I've got 5 keys to give away. If you do want to enter in to receive one of those keys for the base game, go ahead and leave a comment below, and I will randomly select someone the next day or two. Or we'll randomly select 5 people over the next day or two. So again, we're going to start with the Tau faction, and we're going to move through each of the 7 factions, going through essentially how they work from a really high level. This is the point of this video is not to give you a guide to starting out, but just to simply give you an idea of how these factions work, so you can make a really good educated decision on what your next or your first playthrough will be, because I feel like starting out in Gladius can be a little tricky if you've not played the game, so this at least gives you a good kind of overview before getting into it. All things being equal, the first faction I want to talk about is the newest faction, the Tau. Now, from a Warhammer 40,000 perspective, the Tau are also the newest faction to the game. They're one of the youngest factions in the entire lore and continuum of Warhammer 40,000. They play very differently when it comes to Gladius Relics of War. They're a very heavy technical faction in the sense that you're going to deal with a lot of active abilities, and a lot of the big things that they kind of hinge upon are their drones. So we're not going to of course go through every single unit and how to use it and so on and so forth, but I just wanted to show you guys all of the units that you have access to. And all of these drone units, you've got builder drones, gun drones, interceptor drones, pulse accelerator drones, marker drones, grav inhibitor drones, stealth drones, shielded missile drones, and shield drones. Each of these drone units, some can be produced on their own, some are actually thrown up by other units. So if you take a look here, we have got the Pathfinders. They can make pulse accelerator drones, grav inhibitor drones, as well as recon drones. So you can use your units to spawn these drones. And like I was saying, this is a very ability heavy army. So if you are used to having a lot of mechanics to click and buttons to kind of work around, this is the army that's for you. You're not going to deal with a really strong amount of melee damage from these guys. Their big strength is in firing lines. The Fire Warriors will continue to fire from range all throughout your campaign play. Then you're going to have a lot of support from your broad suits, as well from your entire pretty large tank and flyer line. So you've got 2 infantry units in the Pathfinders and the Fire Warriors. You've got these 2 commanders here, the Cadre Fireblade, as well as the Ethereal. Then you've got 2 flyers, the Razor Shark Strike Fighter and the Shark Bomber. Then you've got your 4 tanks, your Piranha, which is less of a tank and more of a little skimmer, which can also, of course, deploy its gun drones that it has on. Same thing with the Devilfish. Then you also see the same thing with the Sky Ray gunship, which is more of a bombardment weapons platform, and your Hammerhead gunship, which is going to be shooting its heavy rail cannon at things. Now, you are not playing Tau if you don't have access to Gundams, I mean the battle suits over here, and they look pretty damn awesome. So you can take a look. We've got the Crisis battle suits, your kind of standard variant battle suit, and the cool thing about these guys is that you can really customize out how you want them to be set up. We can't really take a look at that right now, but the broadside battle suits are here. You also have the stealth battle suits. We have the Ghost Keel battlesuit, as well as the Commander battlesuit back here, and then you've got your big Storm Surge and your Riptide battlesuits. So you can kind of really play with these and customize all the abilities on the Tau. That's the biggest thing about them, is you're going to have a lot of customization, and you're encouraged to build every building in your starter building to get a lot of bonuses from the Tau. In addition, you also have the benefit of really having a lot of really strong early gameplay, because your Fire Warriors are going to be played throughout your entire playthrough. And as you kind of scale through your campaign, you'll see how you can supplement your armies with these battle suits. So, if you like a very mechanical or at least ability-heavy army, then the Towers are going to be the ones for you, especially because they're the newest faction to be added to the game. Another one of the newer factions added to Gladius Relics of War is the Tyranid faction, and they are a little bit different than any other faction in the game. Tyranids are focused completely around biomass. That is this right here. It's a little bit different for every other faction, but you've got biomass, research, and influence. They're supposed to have more cities than the other factions. Factions typically, depending on what you are, is going to control how many cities you actually create. For instance, Space Marines, they thrive off of having 1, if not 2, maybe even 3 cities. Tyranids want to make as many as possible. Playing well with the lore of Warhammer 40,000 Tyranids, which want to completely consume planets. So you've got things like Malanthropes that can consume tiles down to bedrock to gain influence and also give research when you kill enemy units in XP range. It kind of really plays off of the notion of the Tyranids adapting and evolving with each and every death of their units. And on that note too, you can actually take your units and you can kind of consume them back into, I guess you want to call it, not the hive mind, but consume them back into like the grand scheme of things, more or less, and create biomass for yourself. So if you have a bunch of Termagants you've created and you don't actually need that many, you can actually consume them back into the into your resource pool. So the big strength of the Tyranids is 2 things. You're going to be zerging your armies across the board into your enemy. And you have a ton of monstrous creatures. That's really like the big draw of the Tyranids, is look at all this. You have all these huge monstrous creatures. You've got Trigons, you've got Tervagons, Tyrannofex, there we go. And the Carnifex, which means executioner in Latin. Oh, there it is. The Haruspecs, the Raveners, everything is here. The Exoshrine, the Tyranid Prime, then you've got your Hive Crone, then you've got your Hive Tyrant, and you also get access to a lot of really early game flyers, which is a pretty big strength in Gargoyles, because if you're fighting anything that exclusively has only melee capabilities, they can't fight back against them. So that's actually really, really interesting and fun. So Tyranids really make use of synapse creatures to exert their control over their units and reduce instinctive behavior penalties. Otherwise, if they're too far out, they'll have instinctive behavior penalties. I think, yeah, right here. A unit loses morale each turn while not in range of a synapse creature. Max percentage morale regeneration and -2 morale. So when they are lower in morale, you can have things like enslavers take them over, and they can actually control the unit a little bit easier. So this really kind of plays into the whole mechanic from Warhammer 40k, wherein if you have a unit that is outside of synapse range, then you start to have morale issues in 40k itself. So this is really a Zerg faction, and it is meant for you to kind of just consume the planet with your overwhelming horde of Tyranids. One of the last new factions to be added to the game as well are the Chaos Space Marines. Now, you probably have seen me showcase these before, but it's definitely worth going into for this video. And Chaos Space Marines are focused very heavily around a kind of Marine and Demon Engine roster. It's less of the actual Demons of Chaos when you think about Demonettes of Slaanesh or Bloodthirsters and such like that are actually God-specific. This is more of a Chaos Undivided approach from Warhammer 40,000. And it's very interesting because there's this one overarching mechanic I want to look at for you guys. It is called Champion of Chaos. So killing an enemy unit may reward this unit with an unlocked boon of Chaos, or transform it into a Chaos Spawn or Demon Prince. And that's actually a pretty huge thing to kind of take note of. I'm using the debug menu to pretty much spawn in all these units so you guys can see them. And I think it's important because this way you can really decide, oh, okay, is this the faction I want to play? Because there are so many units you don't even know what they look like or what they're all about. So The difference between this faction and, say, the Tyranids is that it's a little bit more constructed, I guess you could say. It's a little bit more standard regimental style. And it is very Marine-centric, where you do have your Chaos Space Marines, you've got your Havocs, which are your heavy Devastator-style squad, you've got your Khorne Berserkers, which are great in melee, and that's another thing, is this faction is very good in melee. You also have your Warp Talons, which are going to be amazing in melee as well, move very quickly across the battlefield, and your base cultists, which make all of your buildings, and your Obliterators too, which are going to be an even further tier upgrade to your Havocs. And then as you take a look, you also have a lot of individual tanks and demon engines to take advantage of. And it's cool too that Slytherin went with the most recent kind of upgrade or update to the Chaos Space Marines, because we've got the Venom Crawler in here. Those were the new Obliterator models. We also have a Master of Possession. So you can see that there's been a lot of recent 40k or Warhammer 40k additions to the game, and it's kind of cool because it kind of keeps it in line with what we are getting on the tabletop. But you do have your Venom Crawler, your Mauler Fiend, your Hell Brute, your Defiler, then there's your standard Rhino, then a Flyer with the Helldrake. There are very few Flyer units at all in the Chaos faction, but I think the biggest thing for Chaos as a whole is this mechanic here, this Champion of Chaos. You can spawn a Demon Prince, like I was saying in the very beginning of the game. It's really, really strong. You're bringing together a lot of the elements of the Space Marine alongside some of the scarier stuff you're going to get with demons, which are very, very tanky, very hard-hitting units that can just outlast a lot of your other units from other armies. And the boon mechanic is really an awesome change to the game, because you can kind of customize all of these guys. And I can't show you the boon mechanic right here. It requires me to actually get a boon unlocked or progress through the game to a certain point. But you have ways to, oh, I can't even open up the research panel. But you can really get into these boons and customize your army in a Nurgle-esque fashion, or a Khorne, or a Slaanesh, or a Tzeentch fashion. These boons are what make you flavor this army according to whichever Chaos God you really want to get into. And of course, as far as demon units go, we have some Chaos spawns right here, which are just so fast and disgusting. Then you have your Chaos Lord, your Master of Possession, your Warpsmith, and your Demon Prince as far as your leadership units go. So, as a whole, I think Chaos is very diverse and very fun, and it covers a wide gamut of possibilities for you as a player. So if you want a tankier, more evil, less units type of army, then Chaos Space Marines are going to be for you. I think that they bring a lot to the table that is a lot of fun for Warhammer 40,000's Gladius Relics of War. Since we've talked about their twisted cousins, I think it's worth bringing up these Space Marines. Now, if you are brand new to the game, I think this might be the best one to start out with. You have very little amounts of city management. You're pretty much just only going to be dealing with one city that is your fortress monastery. Anything else outside of that is just going to be minor expansions that help you out with some research or specific resource acquisition. Now here, we've got requisition, energy, research, and influence. This is going to be the blueprint for the next couple factions going forward, because these are the base factions of the game, not the DLC ones. So when we take a look at the Space Marines, we see a faction that has a very strong infantry core. This strong infantry core allows you to have a very easy early game. Your late game does require a little bit more nuanced approach. You can't just kind of spread yourself thin and go into every single avenue that they can go down, and they can go down quite a bit. I'd say that next to ASTRA Militarum, the Space Marines have a lot of diversity, even though they have a quite narrow roster at the same time. So taking a look over here, we have our standard variant of all types of Marines. We've got our Tactical Squad, which is just going to be your all-rounder. This is your base first access unit to infantry. Then your Assault Squad, which is going to be focused entirely on melee. And then your Devastator Space Marine squads, which are, of course, your heavy attack weaponry. Then you've got also Terminators, which are going to be your tier upgrade to your Tactical Space Marines and the such. You also have some Apothecaries, which can help out with some healing abilities through the Narthesium. Now, as far as the actual command structure goes, you get chaplains, you get captains, and you get librarians. But basically a spellcaster, a hybrid that buffs things up, and then your general melee character. Now, as far as actual tanks and flyers go, there's quite a bit. So you've got your Land Speeder, which is your entry flyer, more of a speeder. Then you've got your Storm Talon gunship, and then lastly your Storm Raven gunship. Each one of these is kind of a tier upgrade on one another. Then starting at the bottom of the bus here, we've got the Predator, then upgrading to a hunter, then to a vindicator, and then to a land raider. And that's not necessarily between all 4 of those. That's not necessarily strictly a tier upgrade. It's just simply like, hey, these are each one of the tanks that you have access to, and they each have a different kind of role. Like the hunter is a little bit more of a long range specialist. The vindicator is going to be just doing a lot of damage up front, and you've got your land raider, which is also a transport and dishes out a ton of damage. Predator 2 is going to be a lot of damage, not so much of a transport. You also have dreadnoughts, your walker, as well as a thunderfire cannon, which is an emplaced turret style cannon that's going to do a lot of damage, and also allows you to clear tiles, which is pretty cool. Now the big thing here, oh, you also have scout bikes as well. Now you're probably wondering to yourself, what's the difference here between TAC Marines and Chaos Space Marines? Well, I'd say pound for pound, Chaos Space Marines, or I'm sorry, Space Marines are the better infantry unit. They've got more diversity, get access to different types a lot earlier in their path, but the Chaos Space Marines have access to boons, which mean they are a lot better in the late game. And same thing with the tanks of the Space Marines. They're a lot stronger in late game if you decide to specialize towards them. So choose this army if you are new to the game, want to get a feel for a lot of the different flavors that you can find across the other factions, as far as tank heavy, good infantry, as well as a lot of different abilities from all of your command structure. So if you want to kind of get a feel for everything, I think Space Marines are the best place to start. Moving through our last Imperial faction is the ASTRA Militarum. And I think that the Imperial Guard are one of the strongest armies in this game. But I'd say the big thing with them is that they start very slow. They're that kind of slow-moving but massive juggernaut in the late game that really picks up strong and hard. It used to be at the very start of Gladius Relics of War when it came out, is that the Imperial Guard was the way to go because they got so strong in that late game. And with Imperial Guard, you get one big heavy focus, and that is tanks. As soon as you get to even just the Sentinels, the walkers, you just have a huge power spike. But they do have some infantry units. So you do have your base guardsmen, which are going to be around from the very beginning of the game. And they're actually very solid base infantry. They are very weak in melee, as you would expect, but they are still a good firing line, a good base, because they can pour out such a high volume of fire. You also have heavy weapons teams, which these guys have rocket launchers. And you have some Bulgarins, which are going to give you some melee stopping power. Also, you've got your Tech Priest Engineer Seers, which help you build cities and clear tiles. And then you've got your Verdwain Psychers, which give you, again, some additional access to buffing as well as abilities. You have Enfeeble here, and then Flame Breath. As far as the command structure goes, you get Lord Commissars, which look awesome, your Primaris Psychers, which are your spellcasters more or less, and then your Tank Commander, which is actually going to be a little bit more support-based by the fact that it is in a tank. And you also get access to some great flyers. Your Thunderbolt, then your Valkyrie, and then your Marauder Bomber. So each one of these is a really awesome flyer in its own right, but the Valkyrie is one of the only transports that you actually get as the Imperial Guard. You're going to be really using this grinding, non-stop Imperial Guardsman slow-moving front supported by your tanks. Now, of course, the walkers are in here. These are the first ones you really get access to. And like I said, they're very early game, but they kind of really give you a nice power spike in sustainability as well as damage. So you want to look out for them on your research and jumping into them quite quick. Then you have your Hydra, which is, well, it was the anti-air tank in tabletop, but you also have your Basilisk and your Hydra, which are really going to be your long-range artillery pieces, followed by your mainline battle line tank with the Lehman Russ battle tank, and an amazing little battle tank all throughout 40k. Then, of course, the big Mamba Jamba itself, Baneblade, which is the coolest tank in the game, probably one of the coolest tanks I've seen in sci-fi. And so with this force, you're really going to be playing an army that is slower than your other armies, to get started at least. They do provide a firing line, much like the Tau do, but you're going to be relying on the supporting fire from your long-range elements in your Basilisk and your Hydra, as well as the staying power of your Baneblade and Lehman Russ battle tank, and the support from your flyers. I think overall, if you want a mechanized force that is going to bring a lot of tanks on the battlefield, Imperial Guard is going to be the one for you. Next up, we'll be talking about the Orks. Now, these Space Orks have a wide range of infantry and also a pretty decent amount of units that are tank/walkers. So with the orcs, you have a very aggressive and melee-focused faction, and I think that's kind of a no-brainer there. But they've got this thing called the WA level, and the way WA works is that with each turn, you get an additional amount of attack percentage based off of two things. One, your total amount of influence, and two, the amount of influence you're bringing in every turn. This will totally stack up, or in total will stack up to 5% bonus for all of your orc units. So you can have a 5% increase to the attack bonus on all of your orcs. So it's a very cool mechanic that is very influence driven. And one of the other things about the orcs is they can actually harvest resources when they destroy other enemy units, tanks, so on and so forth. And I think the big thing for them is kind of using orcoid fungus, which is randomly placed around the map, as kind of a secondary base for you, because you can use that orcoid fungus to regenerate super fast and get additional food income. I don't think there's any around here. Right here some. So this orcoid fungus that you see on the map will actually help out your orcs if you decide to kind of fight around it and be around it. It helps you kind of at least keep your, here's more right here, it keeps your units topped off, which is one of the big things in the game. Health is something that you can regenerate by just simply waiting the turn out using hold your position until healed. More often than not, you'd want to do this in a place that you own, like an actual city, which I don't have built, or one of these little like resource nodes which you own, like this one right here. That'll help give you a little bonus to your regeneration. But of course, having the orcoid fungus is a real great way to get a nice bonus for your orcs. Now, orcs, again, they do rely on their fast-moving melee capabilities, but that's not to say that they don't have any range capabilities. You do have your orc boys, which are your generic starter infantry units. Then you also have got tank buses, which brings some heavy weapons to the fore. Also some mech guns, which are emplaced guns, which will do some heavy damage to tanks for you. But then you jump up to flash gits. You also have access to some mechs or your basic building units. But each one of these guys will really kind of bring a lot of hurt. Now, of course, there's the Mega Knobs, which kind of are the mirror to Space Marine Terminators. These are your heavy infantry. They do a lot of damage in close range and at range. So you have a lot of really good punching power with them. As far as leadership goes, you have access to 4 different leadership units. You've got the Big Mech, Pain Boy, your War Boss, which is just your generic kind of melee centered, but also a little bit of range type of character. Your Big Mech is a little bit more focused on doing range damage, I would say. Pain Boy and Weird Boy are your support style characters, depending on what you want. Pain Boy is your more of your healer type character, whereas Weird Boy has all of your spell type casting abilities. Now, as far as range or air units go, you've got 3 you have access to. An early Def Copters, then you have Daka Jet, and then a Burna Bomber. And none of these are transport units. You're going to be using your actual tank units to do any kind of transporting. As far as that goes, we have our first one in War Buggies, which look at that old school War Buggies right there. Then you also have your Battle Wagon, which is also a transport. Anytime you see this icon, you know you have a transport in your midst. You have your Killicans, which are your base level walker unit, which then upgrades, of course, at the top end to the Gorkanaut, followed lastly by the Gargantuan Squigoth. So with the orcs, you do get a lot of really cool diversity, right? You've got a lot of big creatures, you've got a lot of flyers, but you have a ton of infantry. You're going to be using that melee bonus from all of your WA stacking as much as you can to crush your enemies. The last faction I want to talk about are the Necrons. And I would actually argue, next to Space Marines, the Necrons are the easiest faction to start with. And I think it's because they have a really awesome command of the board. They can move around very quickly. They can teleport a lot all over the place. So you get a lot of benefits with them. Necrons also, they expand quite easily as well. So you're not going to be slogging through one city if you like the Space Marines with your Fortress Monastery. And on top of that, they're a very durable faction because they can resurrect themselves, or at least regenerate themselves, using Necrodermis. So with the Necrons, you also get a lot of really nice unit diversity in a cool way. So your Necron Warrior is your standard infantry unit, and it actually can do well enough in melee combat. Its big benefit, obviously, is its Gauze Flares. Those things just do tons of damage. Then you upgrade to your Immortals if you want a more range-specific melee unit or infantry unit, or your Triarch Praetorians if you want a more melee-centric infantry unit. Then in the back here, we've got destroyers, which are just going to be doing tons of damage from range. You've got your tomb blades, which are a little bit more on the skimmer side of things. Your first entry-level kind of flyer skimmer style unit, which also gives benefits to things. But your Triarch Stalker, I think that's one of these is going to be doing it. There it is. Targeting relay will increase the range accuracy of adjacent allied Necron units that are neither vehicles nor fortifications. So the Triarch Stalker can really help out all of your infantry units when placed inside of it. So they have a lot of really cool overlapping synergy, and this is the Necrodermis Repair I was talking about. You can restore hit points on yourself. It does cost influence to use. Even recalling back to your main city will use influence, and if I had the city up, it would say you can recall units to it. You also have your little Canoptech spiders and your scarabs, which help out with building and clearing tiles. As far as leadership goes, you have your Cryptech, which is your caster-style character, your Destroyer Lord, which is more of a support range powerhouse, and also your Lord, just a standard Necron Lord right there, followed by your Transcendent Catan, or Satan. These bad boys are just going to be doing tons of damage with transdimensional thunderbolts and Sky of Falling Stars. Tons of awesome abilities on these guys. So the last big thing with, I almost said Tyranids, is Necrons, is obviously their insane menagerie of all sorts of twisted looking awesome vehicles. So you get 2 flyers in the night side. Actually, everything flies and skims with them, with the Night Scythes and the Doom Scythes. One is, of course, your transport with the Night Scythe. You also have the Annihilation Barge, which is just a heavy weapons platform. You also get the Doomsday Arc, which is another big shooting platform that's going to do a ton of damage. And you get your 2 big floating pyramids, more or less, with the Monolith and the Obelisk. And I believe one of these helps out with teleportation. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then your last one, which is like an obelisk ×2, is your Tesseract Vault, which has a Catan locked inside of our Satan. So you get a lot of really awesome unit diversity with the Necrons, and they're super durable. They can repair on the go, and they can really recall back and forth to cities as they need. So as you're kind of learning the game and deciding where you need to go, the ability to transport immediately shaves off 4 or 5 turns of transportation for all of your units. It's a really awesome ability if you're just trying to kind of figure the game out. So if you are getting started, go either Necrons or go Space Marines. Those are my big recommendations to you. Alright, and with that, that brings our video to a close here today. Again, this was not aimed at really kind of breaking down how to start the game in the sense of saying, hey, here's your first 10, 15 moves, this is what you should be doing. This is just kind of to break down that barrier of entry when it comes to selecting your first playthrough faction, or if you're returning to the game after all the DLCs have been launched, this gives you a good idea of how the new DLC factions work amongst the other starter or base game factions. So hopefully this again gives you that good primer on how each and every faction gives you a kind of a foothold into the game. Now, if you are starting brand new, I would recommend, once again, either playing the Space Marines or the Necrons. They're going to be your 2 easiest ways to break into the game and get you familiar with a lot of mechanics. I feel like the ASTRA Militarum, while very strong in the late game, doesn't really give you a chance to get your feet wet with the first 15, 20, 30, 40 turns like the other ones do. They're a lot more durable and allow you to really last through that 40-turn slog that is a lot harder on, say, the ASTRA Militarum. But all the DLC races are a lot of fun. They bring a lot of really awesome diversity to the game that really mixes up the formula. So if you enjoyed this video here today, go ahead and comment, like, subscribe, all that kind of awesome action. If you would like a chance to enter in on the raffle for the base game, go ahead and let me know in the comments section below. Just say the comment "for the Emperor," and I'll know that you want to be entered into the raffle. And then take a look out on the community page for the people that do win the raffle. I'm going to go ahead and post your names on there, and I'm going to need you to either email me or jump into our Discord, community Discord in the description, so that you can get access to that key. We'll also be streaming this game on the channel every now and again, so a huge shout out to Slytherin for giving us the keys to give away on both our stream and our VOD here today. So hopefully this again helps you out in getting started in the world of Warhammer 40,000 Gladius.